This is a clock I made for my website. Instead of minutes and hours, it's using internet time, an obsolete time format originally introduced by Swatch in 1998. The Swiss watch company, best known for its affordable and trendy watches. At the time, they set out to reinvent time for cyberspace. They produced multiple watch models, made partnerships with news agencies to display the new format on their websites, and even made a deal with the Russian space agency to launch a satellite that would broadcast messages from orbit, which almost ended up violating international law. That's the story I will get into, but first, let's see how internet time works. Instead of dividing the day into 24 hours like standard time, internet time divides the day into 1,000 equal units called beats, where each beat spans 86.4 seconds when converted to standard time. So 12 p.m. in standard time would correspond to 500 beats. The time is written with an @ symbol followed by the number. For example, instead of saying let's meet at 12 p.m., you'd say let's meet at 500, and then it would be the same time for everyone. Because, unlike standard time, internet time has no time zones and was designed as a universal time format. While internet time never became mainstream, it did find its way into a few interesting places. Notable adopters include the online role-playing game Phantasy Star Online, Nation 1, an online country run by children, and the Ericsson T20e Tomb Raider Edition mobile phone, among others. I started using internet time a while back on my website, by integrating it to my online guestbook. Since I received comments from people all over the world, I wanted a time format that wasn't tied to any one time zone, and was completely different from standard time. What better way to timestamp a digital guestbook than with a format designed specifically for the internet? So making a desk clock to accompany that became a priority. I also wanted to experiment with making the circuitry itself visible, so that every component and connection could be visually traced. I already explored this idea a few years back as a free-form circuit with my astronomy clock project, and I wanted to take it a step further by designing a printed circuit board with the same philosophy. But before I get into how I built the clock, I want to show you how this time format came to be in the first place. On October 23, 1998, Swatch launched internet time in collaboration with Nicolas Negroponte, founder of MIT Media Lab. At the announcement, he said, "Cyberspace has no seasons and no night and day. Internet time is absolute time for everybody. Internet time is not geopolitical, it is global. In the future, for many people, real time will be internet time." Although it sounds like Swatch came up with this new format on their own, Charlie Alberti, the drummer from the Argentine band Soda Stereo, later claimed that he announced the same idea on a domain he bought a few months before the Swatch announcement, and sent a fax to Swatch to sponsor the project. In an interview, he said that he learned a valuable lesson: don't send business proposal by fax. So the origin of internet time still is up for debate, but the idea is the same. If someone in Ankara wanted to chat with someone in New York, they wouldn't need to calculate the time difference. They could just agree to meet at 500, it would be the same time for both of them. Of course, that only worked if both of them had actually adopted internet time in their daily lives. Otherwise, they would still have to calculate the time, converting at 500 back into their own local time. To push for adoption, Swatch launched massive marketing campaigns for their new time format. They released several watch models built around internet time, and made deals with companies like CNN to display it on their websites. They even went so far as to pay the Russian space agency to launch a satellite called Beatnik, which was going to broadcast messages related to internet time from outer space. Wikipedia sums up this part in a paragraph. Under Beatnik satellite controversy, noting that Swatch was criticized for planning to broadcast a commercial message on an amateur radio frequency, and that the satellite was not deployed as planned, Swatch donated its transmitter batteries to the Russian space station instead. But why did Swatch launch this satellite? And how did they end up almost breaking international law? Swatch published the Beatnik project on their website in early 1999, announcing that they were going to launch a satellite carrying voice and text messages from the public. On the announcement, they invited people to submit messages online, with the only requirement being that the messages include the word beat to be considered for selection. After the messages were collected, cosmonauts would launch the satellite from the Mir space station, where it would broadcast selected messages in space. On its own, the commercial aspect of the launch was not unusual. Commercial activity on the space station was common by this point. After the Soviet Union collapsed, the station was funded privately and was running on a deficit, and its bigger customers were corporations. 3 years before Beatnik, Pepsi filmed the first ever TV commercial shot in space that featured a large replica Pepsi can during a spacewalk outside the station.
200 miles above the Earth's surface, it was lights, camera, action as Pepsi-Cola, in conjunction with the Russian Mir space station, began production on the first ever television commercial shot in space.
Mission control in Moscow.
As you know, there are not many territories left where the Cola Wars is not being fought.
I also found this milk commercial, which was filmed by an Israeli dairy company. In which a cosmonaut drank floating blobs of milk aboard the station. So marketing stunts on the station weren't new. The problem was the satellite itself. In the announcement, Swatch said that the satellite was going to broadcast the messages in 145.8 to 146 MHz. If you check a radio spectrum chart, you will see this band is reserved for amateur radio use. Beatnik was, technically, an amateur satellite that was going to broadcast commercial messages, which is strictly forbidden under international law, as amateur satellites are meant for educational and hobby use only. Amateur radio operators caught on fast. Rob Carlson was the first to publicly call out what Swatch was doing. In an open letter, he urged amateur radio operators around the world to boycott Swatch products and to send letters to the International Telecommunications Union. As the outrage grew, AMSAT Friends, the non-profit organization that built the satellite's electronics, issued a public apology. In their statement, they mentioned that they were not aware that Swatch was involved with the project, and that the Russian Space Agency contacted them directly to design electronics for the satellite. But unbeknownst to them, another deal has been made. The Russian Space Agency had separately signed a commercial contract with Swatch. When AMSAT Friends found out, they confronted the Russian Space Agency, pointing out that the message content violated international radio regulations. The Russian Space Agency responded that they were taking full responsibility and that AMSAT Friends couldn't cancel the contract without facing a lawsuit. All eyes were on Swatch. AMSAT had urged them to at least disable the satellite's audio circuit and keep it usable for other mission purposes. But Swatch didn't cancel the launch. Instead, they had the cosmonauts launch the satellite with its battery removed, turning the satellite into space junk on launch. The news was broadcast by French astronaut Jean-Pierre Haigner. As an amateur radio operator himself, Haigner was the one who actually deployed the satellite during a spacewalk outside the Mir space station. He made the announcement on radio, stating, "Due to non-compliance to amateur regulations, instructions were received by the Mir crew to cancel the active launch of the rogue satellite and release it in the off position." This was good news for the amateur radio community. They were successful in their efforts to cancel the launch. And at this point, I was expecting to find a press release where Swatch was admitting their mistake in some way, but that's not what I found. They instead announced the mission as a success on their website. And the next day, Swatch ran a full-page ad in newspapers, including the New York Times. According to the ad, a vital communications link with the Mir space station suffered serious damage a few days earlier, disrupting contact with the station. It claims that Swatch stepped in to help, donating batteries from the Beatnik satellite to power the equipment, which was now being used to send cosmonauts aboard the station their instructions. The ad, which is presented as coming from the Russian Space Agency, expresses gratitude to Swatch for this assistance, and states that, as a way of thanking the company, it has decided to release the messages that have been recorded for the satellite. Selected messages include, "Nobody's going to beat me." "Hi, I need your help to beat the Y2K problem. Thank you so much. Hello to the world." Rather than admit their mistake and take responsibility, Swatch spun the story to protect their image, claiming an equipment had failed, with no mention about the amateur radio community at all. And to be clear, there is no evidence that contradicts this statement. All the major news agencies that covered the story at the time pointed out the discrepancy in Swatch's claims, but were not able to verify them, with the notable exception of the BBC, which reported a completely different version of events. My guess is that the Russian space agency probably suggested this framing themselves, since it let them honor their contract in some way. But again, I have no way to prove that. The Swatch Beatnik website mentions a press conference that took place at the European Space Agency, but I couldn't find it on the European Space Agency archives. And although they report on the mission, there is no mention of the satellite anywhere on their website. The Beatnik website has a video wall, but all the links are broken, as Swatch was hosting the videos on a separate server. The only reason I was able to get this much information regarding the launch was thanks to Robert Carlson, who did an amazing job of saving every link at the time. Some of these pages are not even accessible by the Internet Archive, but they were mirrored by Carlson. Also, hobbyist tracking websites like spacefacts.de were a huge help too. Without them, all this information would be lost. In the end, Beatnik did not transmit anything, and Internet Time itself didn't do better either. Despite the massive promotional campaigns and investments, Internet Time did not caught on with the general public and failed to replace standard time on the internet. If you Google Internet Time now, you will find there is only a single throwaway page on the Swatch website with no mention of the watches or the satellite anywhere. And yet, Internet Time is making a comeback 28 years later. You will find it on personal and indie websites stripped of its commercial roots. There is a growing collection of links and open source tools on GitHub, so you can use to implement Internet Time on your own projects like I did. Now let's get into how I built the physical desk clock. For the brain, I'm using Atmega 328P. It's really cheap and has enough output pins for the display. This is also the same microcontroller that powers the Arduino Uno. For timekeeping, I'm using DS3231. This is a real-time clock module, or RTC for short. It's really good at keeping accurate time, even when there's no power, thanks to a small backup battery. Without this, the clock would reset every time it's unplugged from power. Then, we got the star of the show, the HP DL1414. I was on the hunt for an alphanumeric display for a long time, as I wanted to display the @ sign, which is hard to do with 7-segment displays. The HP DL1414 is a perfect display for this use case, because it has 16 segments and also it was produced in the 90s, making it a great match for this project. For input, I'm only using a single push button for setting the time. As for power, I'm running everything from USB-C. I couldn't use a battery because the display is pulling around 150 milliamps, which would drain the battery really fast. I designed the circuit in KiCad, and I ordered the PCBs with a black core substrate and transparent solder mask, which allows exposed copper traces to stand out against the black background. Before soldering anything on the board, I first had to burn the bootloader on the chip, as these boards did not come with a bootloader. To do this, I used a clamshell breakup board, and used an Arduino to burn the bootloader on the chip. After that was done, I applied solder paste to the board. I put all the components on the board and used my hot plate for soldering. I hand soldered the display and components on the back. After a general inspection and a few tests, the board now is ready for the firmware. The code can be uploaded using a USB to serial converter, or by using another Arduino. The firmware is much simpler compared to a conventional clock. because internet time doesn't require setting hours, minutes, or daylight saving time. A single push button is all that's needed to configure the clock. Pressing and holding the button enters time setting mode, which makes the display blink. While in this mode, when the button is pressed, time is advanced, and holding the button continuously speeds up the adjustment. After the button is released, the clock exits time setting mode after a few seconds and saves the new time to the real-time clock chip. And that's all there is to it. If you want to make your own, I put together a step-by-step guide along with all the files required to make your own internet time clock. It also includes a breadboard version if you don't want to get into making the PCB. You can find the link to the files on my Patreon, which is linked below.